A, 1, 2. Okay. Okay. Still hot? Testing. 1, 2. A, B.
Hello. Judges 1 and 2, can you hear us? Start talking.
A, B, B, C, 3, 3.
Yes, judges 1 and 2 can hear you. So you want to come back over here now?
All right. I like it.
That is live. It's on.
Still on. Okay.
Testing.
Okay. A, B, C, D, E, F. I don't. All right.
The judges had thumbs up.
Yeah, I think it'll be pretty good. But I think everything will be ready. You sounded good back there, so.
All right. Ooh.
Have you introduced yourself? Why not do you do that? Or I can introduce you.
I don't want to say anything.
Okay.
Hosting this regional final is our president-elect of Optimist International, Jan Orr-Graves. So let's give her a round of applause. She just came in this morning, and she's also a former president of the Optimist International Foundation. And her husband, Ron Graves, sitting over here, you want to wave? Ron is also a past president of the Optimist International Foundation, and he and S.E. Johnson from Tennessee were the people who first I appointed to raise funds for the scholarships. So thank you, Ron, for being with us from the beginning.
Thank you very much, Dave. We're pleased to be here, and I just wanted to give everyone a couple of reminders to please hold your applause until the very end after all the speakers are done. I know it's difficult because they're all so fabulous. We automatically want to applaud, but please do not and hold your applause till the very end. Also, if you need to step out, you need to wait until a speaker is completely finished. So only enter and exit this room between speakers. So thank you.
It's fine. So should I be back there and walk out? Or should I be back there and walk out? Or should I be here? Okay. Where did he go? That's fine. Taking the air, the elements.
Okay, now we are ready for speaker A.
Discovering the optimism within me has made me rich. Today, I want to share the discovery of my optimism and the treasures I have found during my journey. 2 weeks after the day I was born, doctors delivered the devastating news to my mother that I had a condition called NEC. NEC is an acronym for a long, hard to pronounce term that basically meant I had a set of life-threatening holes in my intestines. Those holes were letting in air, and on x-rays were displaying as massive dark areas. I and many premature babies have suffered from this condition. The day before I went into surgery, my mother could only stand over my tiny body as I laid it in an incubator while she held my limp hand. Just before I went into surgery, my mother could only think of all that could go wrong. Sobbing, she tried to prepare to leave my side. She told me later that just as she was letting go, I lazily cocked one eye open and squeezed her finger. She said that even as a baby, without words, looking out of that one eye, she believed I was telling her that everything will be okay. During my journey, there are a few people I would consider my optimism guides. One night while staying with a family friend, we were discussing plans for the future. A dark storm of doubt blew into my mind, telling me I wouldn't be able to achieve what I need to make it that far in life. The one thing that ended that storm were the words, "With a bit of faith, anything can happen." Those are the words my friend gave me before I went off to bed. After hearing those words, a new form of confidence grew within me. Now, when I become stressed or worried, I recall those comforting words that let me know that all I need is a bit of faith. Having that optimism guide in my life has been a discovery of pure gold. There are also people who look down on me for my optimistic thinking. To them, optimism is hopeless dreaming of something that isn't likely to happen. I'm okay with pessimists because there are things we should fear. Pessimism and optimism are both coping methods. We all have our own perspectives. It takes work to maintain a positive outlook, but I also know that sulking or focusing over potential issues can actually drain the energy needed to address those problems. I have a few friends that suffer from anxiety. I've seen them worry constantly when facing tough situations. I like to call this POOR, P-O-O-R, an acronym for when they persistently overlook opportunities and results. With this condition, there are life-threatening holes in their hope. If you were to look close at this condition, you would see that it leaves massive dark voids where there should be success. No one deserves the suffering that comes from the death of possibility. Optimism for me is like my surgery, cutting away at the waste and offering an opportunity for new life. Today, even with scars, discovering the optimism within me has made me feel that I am rich. 18 years, 113 days, 13 hours, and counting is the time since my journey began, and I continue to discover many possibilities. Have you ever lost a dollar bill? Maybe it's been washed up in a pair of jeans or jacket pocket. That's how I would describe the journey of discovering my optimism. When I was at a loss for answers, like those lost dollars, they are right there, waiting to be found. Also like those lost dollars, my bits of optimism were not earned. They were gifts. I accepted those gifts, and I could only choose to spend or lose them. So, since I am rich, I want to share my optimism with you today. I have discovered 3 things. 1, I consciously surround myself with positive people and engage in activities that bring me joy. 2, I practice gratitude and work on maintaining an optimistic mindset. 3, I exercise and say no to drugs. If you would take these gifts I have to share into consideration, I'll take what remains, put it in a frame, and set it on my shelf. So when I'm an old man, I can reminisce on this journey I've taken. If you see me again, I hope you remember what I've shared today, and you too can say everything will be okay. Thank you. Test, test, test.
A, B, C, D, E.
Now for our second speaker of the Southeast region, Speaker B.
Discovering the optimism within me. As I stand here today, I'm reminded of when I first began writing this speech. I'd expected a simple account of what brings me so much joy, of what inspires optimism within me each day. So I thought, where better to begin than with my daily thoughts? What does an optimist think like? Today was miserable. I feel like giving up. I will never be good enough. I had realized that I was no optimist. I lacked hope for a better world, a better future. I expected meaningless adversity, and that is all I saw in the world. When I saw hardship, when I saw suffering, when I saw the grandmother who raised me for the last time, where was there optimism to be found? Where was there light when things seemed so dark? In the similar words of Amy Rosenthal and David Foster Wallace, we must pay attention to what we pay attention to. We must think about what we choose to think about. And me, I had made the choice to think about each and every wrong thing I saw in the world. So I had to start clean. I had to look inward. If I was to discover optimism, I knew first I would have to overcome the pessimism which had consumed my thoughts. I had to overcome the negative beliefs about the world, about myself. I had to overcome the belief that there wasn't hope, that there wasn't better. And just maybe at the end of that dark tunnel, at the peak of that great mountain, I could discover the optimism within me. I have this habit of listening to music when I'm in a crowd. It's as if by putting on my headphones, I'm able to escape. I'm able to silence this voice. It's deafening at times, the sound of my own thoughts. You are not good enough. You actually think you could do something great. I had made the choice to isolate myself from the world around me. I had made the choice to be alone rather than to confront my pessimistic nature. However, when looking at my pessimism, I realized I lacked hope for myself, for my future, because I lacked hope for the world, for our future. I had shaped my view of the world based on all the problems I saw in it. I saw the world as a canvas, a once beautiful painting covered up by the most depressing colors, with each black splotch representing all the death, each deep blue stain representing all the sadness, all the loss, each violent red gash representing all the hate and division. And I wasn't wrong, but with each new invention, with each humanitarian effort, with each compassionate embrace, when we as a people come together, we can work towards a brighter future. And our future is bright. Just 200 years ago, a couple generations, almost the entire population lived in extreme poverty. Now, that number is less than 10%. Just 200 years ago, smallpox had killed hundreds of millions of fathers, mothers, and children, a disease which has now been eradicated. 200 years ago, owning another human in America was legal. Now, as a united people, we are moving forward into a brighter future. I now realized that there is hope. And that hope lies in us, because when we as a people come together, we have the strength to weather any storm. Because when I struggle to discover optimism, when amidst adversity that seems too great, I find strength in those around me, in the optimism of those around me. Because while pessimism doubts that we can make a difference, that we are anything more than our mistakes, optimism is the belief, the conviction that with full faith, we can achieve the impossible daily. And as I stand here today, I stand here an optimist, fueled by the passion to make a difference, to paint a better world. And it is my hope that I might inspire you to add your brushstrokes of positivity each day, because together we can create something truly beautiful. Thank you.
Test, test, test. Hear me? Did it cut off? Test, 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 test. All right. Test. Can everyone hear me? ABC, 1, 2, 3. All right.
Speaker C.
My journey to discovering the optimism within me began in 6th grade, when my cousin went from having a small cut on her ankle to being in the intensive care unit with necrotizing fasciitis, a life-threatening infection, all within the span of 36 hours. Thankfully, through the power of science and medicine, she was completely cured. But this moment galvanized my passion for utilizing science to protect my community and sparked my optimism to take actions into my own hands. I was optimistic that I could change people's lives through science. Knowing what happened to my cousin, I was worried about what infectious dangers my community might be exposed to in their everyday lives. Combining my interests in microbiology and community service, I pioneered a project that year to test the bacterial contamination on commonly touched surfaces, such as elevator buttons and grocery store touchscreens. In this experiment, I identified that nearly all tested items contained extremely high levels of dangerous bacteria. My goals were both scientific and humanistic. As a future physician scientist, I wanted to protect my friends, family members, and community from these potential exposures. But I was also fascinated by the world of microbiology and optimistic that as an individual, I could create large ripples of change. For my work recognizing these imminent dangers to my community, I won first place in my state in the National Science Fair competition. However, I wanted to do more. I was concerned about what other infectious exposures could harm my community. I thus performed a literature review on PubMed, which is the world's largest repository for peer-reviewed medical papers, and found that public transportation was a common area for danger. In 2019, Goli et al. Published a paper identifying high levels of dangerous bacteria on subways in Sweden. I was concerned about his findings, yet optimistic that I could utilize this knowledge to protect the 18 million annual Metro Rail riders in my own community. Inspired by Goli's work, I designed a project that year to test the bacterial contamination on commonly encountered surfaces on multiple train cars and stations. Bad news. I once again identified extremely high levels of dangerous bacteria on nearly all tested locations. Less than 1 month later, in March of 2020, COVID-19 devastated the United States. My worst fear had been realized. An invisible organism had ravaged the lives of millions. People were scared to leave their homes and afraid of potential exposure. The problem solver in me wanted to take action. Given my previous research and experiences, I had the unique opportunity to retest my city's Metro Rail mid-pandemic to assess the effectiveness of the implemented COVID safety measures. I thus authored and was awarded a $5,000 STEM in Action grant from the US government to retest my city's Metro Rail and to implement proper hand hygiene education throughout my community. This time, I finally found some good news. I identified a dramatic, statistically significant decrease across the board in dangerous bacteria. Furthermore, all of my PCR testing for COVID-19 came back completely negative on all tested locations. This proved to me that increased cleaning regimens and better hand hygiene were crucial for protecting my community. Funded by my grant, I also launched free hand sanitizer distribution events and lectured at low-income schools about the importance of proper hand hygiene. My goal was to infuse these young students with a curiosity for science and to stay optimistic about the future. Marking the conclusion of my multi-year journey to discovering the optimism within me, in 2021, my county school board awarded me a proclamation of excellence for my work promoting safety within the community. It was an honor, but my real joy was knowing that my hard work had actually helped protect my community. As I now move to study public health this fall at college, I'm optimistic about the future. My microbiology and community service projects served as my beacons of optimism. They proved to me that as an individual, a high schooler, I could still achieve my goals of helping others and creating large ripples of change. Despite the immense challenges we face, I don't despair about the future. Rather, I'm optimistic that hard work, dedication, and community service will make a difference in the lives of my community.
All right. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P. Okay. Awesome.
Speaker D.
I don't remember discovering the optimism within me. From a very young age, I've held an instinctive connection with optimism. I mean, it's hard to discover something that's really always been there. It's almost as if it were a seed planted within me, growing and developing as I've done the same. Its presence has given birth to many joys and comforts in my life, nourishing my innocent youth. Well, it's even helped shape my personality, developing positive characteristics within me that I then exude upon others. These characteristics are who I am. They define me at my best and especially at my worst. Now, growing up, my defining characteristics were not those of the typical kid. This has allowed me to view the world from a different perspective. I've been able to take situations of discourse and find the common ground, acting from a neutral standpoint and providing a sense of peace for both sides. My optimism has acted like a shield, allowing me to endure the misfortunes and to come out the other side with the same smile on my face that I went in with. Optimism has been a perpetuating light in my life, remaining lit no matter what has come my way. But then I got older. In spite of my connection with optimism that had come so naturally, I found myself battling with feelings such as doubt, anxiety, fear, hate. As I've gotten older, I've learned to hate. In the world we live in today, hate is such an easy emotion to express. Sometimes it's even easier than love. For example, man, I hate running. When I run, it doesn't take long for my breath to cut short. My chest gets heavy and my heart starts beating faster and faster. I'm so aware of my legs and how they're moving, but I'm not going where I want to go. I'm not moving fast enough. There are a million reasons why I hate running and should have no interest in doing it again. So I joined the track team. I joined a team dedicated to running so that I can get better. Now look, I'm not a sports person. I don't even watch football like that. But I've realized something. I've realized that the more that you run, the more it gets better. Last year, I was told I'd be moving schools. It was a decision I had no say in, and it completely changed my life. I had friends at my school, a family that I had built since the second grade. I didn't want to leave them. I didn't want to abandon the roots that I had planted and allowed to grow in healthy soil. So I sat and I thought about what was going to happen, how I was going to be taken away from my home. But then I began to feel something unexpected. I felt excitement. I was excited about the new opportunities coming my way. The 26th president of the United States, Theodore Roosevelt, once stated, "Do what you can with what you have where you are." I was going to a new school. That fact, it wasn't changing. But what I do with that fact is something that I can change. Just the other day, I was stressing about an essay I had to write. An essay. It was long and boring, and I could not for the life of me figure out what to write. So instead of getting angry and allowing my frustration to build, I took a second, thought about what I had, where I was, and what I could do about it. So I did what I could with what I had where I was, because sometimes that's all you can do. Since my days of tag on the playground and seeing the best in everyone have ended, I've learned to hate. I hate writing essays. I hate having to move schools. I hate running. But I love getting good grades. I love making new friends, and I love getting better. What I've discovered about the optimism within me isn't that it's something that needs to be found or learned. It is simply a choice that you make. Thank you.
Test, test, test. Good. You want me to talk louder? Test, 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 test. Good.
Speaker E.
Discovering the optimism within me. Life is like a garden with humans as its caretakers. We have the freedom to cultivate a rich, successful environment for our goals, ambitions, and passions to grow. In the corner of my soul's garden lies a little plant called optimism that I love to water at least once a day. The grass is always greener where you water it, and optimism is just the same. A positive mindset is a lifestyle that needs love and care to prosper. Optimism is an attitude of hope, looking for the good instead of focusing on the bad. Choosing to have a positive mental attitude is the best choice I made to improve my quality of life. Deciding to see the world through rose-colored glasses will lower stress levels, increase self-motivation, and enhance happiness. Anticipating a positive outcome instead of worrying about failure can help manage stress. Just as flowers need rich soil to bloom, to have an abundant life, we must make the effort to plant ourselves in good soil by working from the inside. Idealism starts from within. Christopher Berglund writes that researchers at Concordia University's Department of Psychology have found that the stress hormone cortisol tends to be more stable in people with a positive outlook. Our thoughts are the seeds in the garden of life. We can choose to grow flowers or to grow weeds. How I react, my behavior, and my mindset are the choices that can be the difference in my mental and physical health. We shouldn't complain because roses have thorns, but rejoice because thorns have roses. Having a worldview that interprets situations and events as being best can help lower stress levels. Sunflowers always end up facing the sun. When the light moves, they move, despite the effort to get there. If we can learn to be like a sunflower and turn our faces to the light, we won't see our hardships lurking in the shadows. In John Warner's book, Slam, he reveals that keeping an optimistic mindset and being able to overcome hardships is a key part in being able to keep yourself motivated. When we learn how to use optimism to continually stay motivated, we will be less dependent on others and push ourselves to meet our goals through one's own abilities. Warner goes on to say, those who are discouraged in difficult times are certain to lose even before the battle is over. There is a persistent internal battle between falling into the headspace of learned helplessness or acquiring the ability to keep a positive mindset. Looking on the bright side, even when times get tough, encourages me to stay motivated and achieve my goals. Being a teenager in the world we live in, where social media is in almost every aspect of life, can be damaging to our happiness. It is difficult for young minds to realize that social media is a highlight reel and influencers' lives are not as perfect as they may seem. The social media platforms, Mad Happy and the Local Optimist, have made it their mission to promote mental health and positive mindsets. They use the attention they get to educate about the negative effects social media can have on a person's mental and physical self-image. They teach teens the concept that flowers don't think about competing against the flowers next to it, they just bloom. This internet community has turned a place that is seemingly negative into something positive. Some recent posts mention growth, identity, rest, and logic. What do all of these words have in common? Optimism. The doctrine that this world is the best world possible. The Local Optimist and Mad Happy are doing their part in convincing the world to start their day with a positive outlook, no matter what obstacle that day brings. The act of choosing happiness one day at a time will decrease stress, help us stay self-motivated, and create a happy environment for us to go about life in. So what are you planting in your garden? The only person capable of caring for your garden is you. Sure, there will be weeds that we didn't ask for, but what you focus on grows. So focus on the good and you'll have more of that. Thank you. Testing, can y'all hear me? Testing, can y'all hear me?
Speaker F.
What is discovering the optimism within me? Have you ever gone on a wild goose chase just to find peace of mind? I know I have. Today, I'm going to share with you my story. I was very outgoing as a child. For example, I would often talk to strangers in the grocery store when my mom took me shopping and would sometimes say some pretty silly things. I also remember the first day my family moved into our new home. While my parents and brothers were moving the boxes inside, I had a plan of my own. I went door to door, knocking, and introduced myself to each one of my neighbors. It's pretty silly looking back, but what I realize now is that I had a sparkle that no one could take away. I had to learn this in the hardest and darkest moments of my life. Most people go through an awkward phase in junior high or even high school. I'm no exception to this rule. Girls are suddenly into clothes, shoes, makeup, and fitting in. Boys are navigating what it takes to become a man. The girls around me were changing so rapidly, but not me. I was still really outgoing, naturally confident, and unbothered by the pessimism of the world. Unfortunately, that would soon change. The girls around me were really concerned with being thin. I did not fit that standard. I was a short and chubby girl. Those girls saw that I wasn't like them, and I began to get bullied, constantly being called names like fat, ugly, and stupid. On top of that constant battle, someone very dear to me unfortunately lost her battle to cancer, my great-grandmother. It felt like there was a piece missing that had been so unfairly taken away from me, and all that I was left with was hurt. This was the final straw. I decided that it was time for change. I thought that maybe if I went on a diet, I would finally meet the standards that those girls cared so desperately for. Looking back, a perfectly healthy 12-year-old going on a diet makes me uneasy, but I was blind at the time. It started out as eating healthier and exercising a little more. However, I soon became obsessive because it was all I thought and cared about. After a while, I spiraled out of control. My ribs were showing, and it felt like I was going to pass out every time that I stood up. I was constantly being monitored by my doctors and was even put in counseling. Self-harm became a daily ritual of mine. Even though I was finally thin like those girls, I was ridiculed and called new names like bones, twigs, and disgusting. I wanted so desperately to go away and to take the easy way out, because then I wouldn't have to suffer anymore. The end of the school year came, and my mother told me she was transferring me to a different school. I finally saw light at the end of the tunnel and began to make a full recovery. The new school was, although I'd become physically healthy, I wasn't happy. The new school was great, but I still didn't fit in. I did not even speak at school during this time. My freshman year rolled around, and I decided to take an agri-science class on a whim. Luckily, one of my ag teachers saw my potential and faded sparkle. He handed me a copy of a speaking contest. Emphasis on speaking contest. Over the next few months, I learned how to become a leader. I went on to place second at the parish level, first at district, first at area, and then first in the state. I got to compete at the national level, where I ended up being 5th in the nation. My sparkle was not only visible, but it was glowing. I finally found who I was and fell in love with that person. If there's anything I could tell you from my experience, it's that finding optimism is hard and it's a journey, but it is not impossible. The biggest tool is perseverance. Never giving up is key. If I've learned anything, it's that life is too short to spend trying to be something you're not. If you spend every moment you can making a positive difference, you will soon create optimism for yourself and for others. Be true to who you are and never, and I mean never, let anyone make your sparkle turn dull and faded. Own your sparkle and let it shine so bright it can be seen from outer space. There's no time to waste, so get out there and sparkle. Thank you.
Dave Bruins. I think he's gone.
Test. Okay. A, B, C, D. Okay.
Speaker G.
Optimist, judges, ladies and gentlemen, and my fellow competitors, a pleasant afternoon to you all. I rise to give my take on the topic, discovering the optimism within me. The meaning of life is the number 42. or so the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy would have you believe. However, despite my inability to do basic math, numbers and dates have become a part of my very being and have taken liberty to ingrain themselves into my everyday life. My first big encounter happened on the 11th of the 19th, 2012, the day before my birthday. I lost my mother that day, and that's when I became the embodiment of pessimism. My last significant encounter happened on the 9th of the 5th, 2021, when my father was murdered. I had come to the realization that if my life were a book, I'd have named it The Eulogy, because it seemed that from a young age, I'd been reading eulogies for people I called family. And I suppose looking at it that way was the reason for my pessimistic view of life. I admire people who I have come across who express their challenges, but still remain smiling, still remain jovial. Truth be told, I also envy them. Because let's be honest, ladies and gentlemen, life is hard. So while I admire them, I still feel a partial annoyance towards these hopeful people. Life is hard. You should act as such. And when I say act as such, your hand should be on your jaw and you should portray the epitome of I got bills to pay and children to feed. Then upon this thought, there was a pause. I most definitely don't have children to feed, and I most certainly don't have bills to pay, yet. Every morning I wake up, I never have to question how I will get breakfast, but rather what's for breakfast. I am healthy, and if I am nothing else, I am God's child. So yes, ladies and gentlemen, life is hard. But even in doing the things we deem insignificant and unnecessary, if we appreciate them just a little bit more, we will begin to discover the optimism within us. I must confess, however, I'm still in the process of discovering the optimism within me. It is not an easy feat, and not one I can adhere to consistently, because for some of us, we cannot always remain hopeful despite hard situations. We cannot always seek to see the world through la vie rose, which is the French way of saying seeing the world through rose-colored glasses, and in a more simpler term, in happy hues, and in a more modern term, seeing the glass half full. We cannot always remain positive during the negatives, ladies and gentlemen. I cannot always smile in the face of adversity. But I can tell you that I am well on my way there. I am well on my way to being the optimistic individual I'm capable of being. I give it 3 to 5 business days, or perhaps more. Perhaps in a few months, I will not hate numbers so ardently. Perhaps then, instead of saying the meaning of life is the number 42, I will say to you that according to the American Standard Code for Information Interchange, the number 42 is the code for the asterisk symbol, which is often thought to translate to anything or everything. The meaning of life is no mere number. It is everything, everything good, everything bad, everything in between. So yes, ladies and gentlemen, while it is hard, to an optimist, life is everything. Even more so, perhaps, if my life were a book, instead of entitling it the eulogy, I'd call it the testimony. And when that day comes, I will become the embodiment of optimism. And if you're a true optimist, you'd believe that that day is already here, because it is safe to say that I'm learning to live on the sunny side of everything and making my optimism come true. I thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you join me in thanking and congratulating the speakers of the Southeast region. Now we're going to ask if you would introduce yourself and include where you're from. Oh, slide down this way in between the blue lines. There we go. A little bit more. Yeah, that's Judge Bruins there speaking. That's good. Perfect. So if you'd introduce yourself, including where you're from, what grade you're in school, what your future educational plans are, college, and what kind of a career, and then those you may have brought with you and who you'd like to thank. So we'll start with speaker A.
Hey everyone, my name is Young. Nice to meet you all. I just graduated high school. Fun. I'm going to Troy University for college. I'm going to be doing computer science. I love art and I'm just glad to be here. I'm happy to see all the contestants, happy to see everyone here. And I just really want to thank my lovely mother. Where'd she go? There she goes. Gotta love her, and she helped me all the way here. And I just thank you, Mom. Love you.
My name is Adam Towner. I am from South Carolina, 16. I'm going to be a junior next year. I honestly could not be here without the wonderful support of my two amazing parents and just all the friends that have supported me along the way through the many hours of working on this speech. I'm not sure what quite I want to do yet, possibly opening a business or possibly going into nuclear physics. Not completely sure.
Hello, everyone. My name is Noah Cohen, and I'm from Miami Beach, Florida. So I just graduated high school, and I'll be attending Brown University, majoring in public health, and I'll be on the pre-medicine track. So a quick thank you. I want to thank my parents who are right over here for taking me to St. Louis, even though it was a mess to get here. My brother who's watching this from home, and all of our friends and family who are here, the Optimist International Club for putting this together, and especially the Miami Lakes Optimist International Club with Jim Hamilton, Mr. Christian Spano, and Ms. Robin Heckler for all their work to get me to this place.
Hi, my name is Shad McMillan. That's Shad with an S. I am representing the Gateway District from Carrollton, Georgia. I'm 17 years old and I'm going into my senior year next year. I'm glad to be here. I'm happy to be here. I thank God every day for bringing me here because, like, wow, this is amazing. I want to thank everyone here. I'm here with other leaders from the Gateway District and my beautiful, handsome Mr. Richard Bracknell, my speech coach. He's amazing. I thank him for bringing me here and helping me to figure out that I'm somewhat of a public speaker. So anyways, I thank you all. I thank my mom. I thank my family, and I'm happy to be here.
Hi, everybody. My name is Taylor Swearingen, and I'm from Marianna, Florida. I'm 17 years old. I attend Marianna High School. I'm going into my senior year, and after that, I plan on attending Florida State University and majoring in political science. I want to thank my parents, Farah and Jonathan Swearingen, and my brother over there, Bo, for bringing me here. And I want to thank Miss Liz Jackson for pushing me to compete in this amazing opportunity. So yeah, thank y'all.
My name is Jillian Lance. I'm from Jennings, Louisiana. I'm 17 years old and I will be going into my senior year of high school. I would like to thank everybody who has gotten me here today. I'm here with my mom and my dad. I would especially also like to thank the judges for their time and dedication to what they put into our contest. And I hope to one day be an agricultural lawyer.
Afternoon again, ladies and gentlemen. I am Nikita Gordon. I am from Jamaica. As you can see, I'm quite literally freezing cold. I am basically 19 years of age. I know it's shocking. I know. But I'm looking to study law at the moment. I'm in 12th grade, which is basically a senior in Jamaica, and I will be graduating next year to go on to law school and to then become a judge. I just want to say thank you for everyone for coming out, for supporting. Thank you to my wonderful, beautiful, and amazing aunt who had us here for 3 connected flights, and she came with me. So thank you to her. Thank you to my family back home and my biggest supporters, my friends, my school, and the rest of my family. And I want to thank and congratulate everyone here, because it is truly a blessing to even be here in the first place and to come up here and do what each and every one of us did. And I'm so proud. So yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks again to the wonderful speakers of the Southeast region. And we will have come down here for pictures. We will have what, a 10 to 15 minute break? 5-minute break. Southwest region contestants, please come forward. We'll get started in about 5 minutes.
It'll probably be more than 5.
BB, but.
Say
Test.
Don't lean into it.
Okay.
How you would normally talk.
Testing. 1, 2, 3.
We'll test her out.
Okay.
There you go. Test. 1, 2, 3.
Test. 1, 2, 3.
Is that your-
Y'all hear us?
That's
That's close to your stage voice?
definitely.
You want to be as natural as possible.
Got it.
All right, so. There you go.
I need to not pull my hair back.
It's gonna be a few minutes, so I'm just gonna turn you off.
Judges, can you hear us?
Yes.
Yes.
And then make sure that. Would you, is she turned back on?
You're now on the light mic.
Can the judges hear us?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Can you speak or you just give it a look?
Test, test.
Judges, can you hear the contestant?
Yes.
Test. 1, 2, 3. Test.
Yes.
Welcome, everyone, to the Southwest Regional Competition. Before we get started, my name's Deb Merritt, and I am the president of the Optimist International Foundation this year. Before, just a couple of housekeeping. If you have not already done so, if you could please silence your cell phones so none will go off during the competition. Also, you can take pictures, but if you do so, please turn your flash off. Please do not enter or leave the room during one of the contestants' speeches. If you do have to leave, please do so or wait in between speeches. Finally, please, no clapping or applause until after all the contestants have finished their speeches. At that point, we will allow all of them to come up on stage. We can give them a round of applause. They can introduce themselves, tell you where they're from, a little bit about their family, and what their expectations are for the future. So at this point, we shall be getting started in just a moment. Speaker A.
Discovering the optimism within me. Optimism, as defined by dictionary.com, is a tendency or a disposition to look on the more favorable sides of things and expect the most favorable outcome. It is not something we are born with. Rather, it is something that is able to be developed. However, developing this skill is not as easy as it may sound. According to Harvard Health, there are two main time periods in which learned skills are developed: early childhood, ages 3 to 5, and adolescence and early adulthood, ages 13 to 26. The latter of which is a time overflowing with angst, struggle, heartbreak, and hormones. All things considered, it's hard to believe in the best happening when it feels like the world is constantly beating you down. In fact, there's even a common sentiment shared by everyone who has struggled their way through their adolescent years. Growing up is hard. Though different struggles may be faced, the narrative stays stagnant. A young, starry-eyed child becomes a moody, struggling teenager. And my story really isn't that much different. I used to be the happy and gifted child, the kind of kid who made friends with everyone and always had assignments returned with that bright red 100 on the top. And yet, here I am today, a girl aged 15 who seemingly procrastinates chronically, a girl trekking through the long and rough fields between childhood and adulthood that we call adolescence. I have struggled tremendously alongside all of my peers with the impacts of being isolated the entirety of my 7th grade year and the fallout of that mental and physical social separation. And yet, despite the toll that has been taken on me these past 4 years, I have discovered that I still have something left in the bank, something that is much more powerful than money or business connections. I have hope. Hope for the future and hope for everyday life. This hope is what allows me to keep going. You see, hope is the root of all optimism. Without hope, we wouldn't have optimism. Without optimism, we wouldn't have optimists. And without optimists, our world would be much, much different and not for the better. Optimists are the root of every major social change that has ever taken part. Desegregation, women's right to vote, anything, you name it. Optimists are there. Their belief that their efforts would pay off in a better and brighter future for all people gave them the motivation to keep going. That is optimism at its finest. And then there's the issue of pessimism. Optimism and pessimism are different in many ways, but one of the key ways that I have found is that optimism is centripetal. It brings people together. It is unifying and motivating. Pessimism, on the other hand, is centrifugal. It tears people apart and results in a lack of action and motivation. See, I realized this when I was hanging out with one of my friends one day, and we were walking along in the park, and suddenly he just started throwing trash everywhere, all over the ground. I stopped and I was confused because he seems like the kind of person who would be helping save the earth, not one of the people destroying it. So I asked him, "Why did you do that?" His response, well, the earth is dying anyways. And that made me think about something. When you look at something, anything, from the perspective that what you do doesn't matter and it doesn't have an impact, you are spreading despair and a pessimistic attitude. You see, pessimism and optimism, despite all their differences, have one thing in common. They're both viral mindsets, one of health and the other of sickness. By losing your drive and motivation to fight, you are allowing the darkness to spread and consume the light. Though this world may be filled with horrible, horrible things, I will not let myself give up. I will continue to plant all of the hope I have in the soil of the minds around me. Stormy weather will not keep me from my fields. I will continue to work and fight, even when it would be easier to flee from the incoming storm. Because optimism is much, much bigger than just me. And it is much, much bigger than any dictionary definition. It is our past, our present, and our future. It is hope, equality, and redemption. It is believing in yourself when no one else does. It is unifying, motivating, and powerful. Optimism is the only way that we can survive and thrive together. So I will do my part to continue discovering the optimism within me. Thank you.
Testing, testing. Testing, testing.
Can y'all hear her okay in the back? Good. Speaker B.
Discovering the optimism within me was an arduous process. My journey in becoming the optimist that I am today has been full of ups and downs. And let me give you a real, raw, uncut view into that former version of myself. Imagine being a person whose heart and mind was not yet prepared for the real world. Imagine questioning your life's purpose. Maybe you feel that way right now. And if not, at least empathize with us, then you'll understand why I was such a late bloomer in the area of optimism. In middle school, I used to love planning little outings and parties for me and my friends. One event I organized was a weekend roller skating party. I called all of my friends and everyone agreed to the plans. Monday until Friday, I dreamed about how much fun we were going to have. I chuckled at the thought of how we would probably get our skates and fall a couple of times, or how we would probably beg our parents to have a sleepover afterward. I was thrilled when Saturday arrived, but that joy quickly turned to sadness, and in the words of legendary blues singer B.B. King, the thrill was gone. I received a text from one of my friends. She told me that she wouldn't be able to make it. Then I received another text from another girl who told me that something came up. One after another, I received the cancellation notice from 4 out of the 5 girls I had invited to the roller skating party. They literally skated out on our celebration. So I decided to FaceTime or video call one of the last girls I had invited to see if she was still coming. And when she answered, she was at the carnival with all of the girls who canceled on me. And when I asked her Why didn't she just invite me? Why didn't they just ask if I wanted to join them? She coldly responded. It was last minute. Needless to say, I was heartbroken. My mom did her best to try to console and encourage me, telling me that my friends' cruel actions were just from a lack of etiquette and no home training, but not any fault of mine. But I didn't believe her. I was too depressed to believe anything other than the negative thoughts that were flooding my brain. I was to blame for the deception. My friends didn't like me anymore. I pushed my friends away. And many people will probably not understand why this event affected me so deeply. I mean, it's just life, right? Happens to all of us. But coming from a world where I believed that life would be like the ones I saw on Disney Channel, I was in for a rude awakening. In high school, the same situation kept happening over and over again. I met someone, we grew close, their true colors were revealed and our relationship was over. And I'm not sure what it was, whether it was me or the people that I came across, but I never operated with ill intent, so why was it being done to me? I continued to blame myself. Help was on the way though. My optimism was about to break through like a glorious dawn. My parents were a major contributing factor to the rise of my optimism. They continuously told me, God is using you for something and it's all going to be worth it, just watch. There's a popular Bible verse that says, weeping may endure during the night, but joy comes in the morning. And although I had endured many tearful nights, one night I decided that something had to change. I grabbed my birthday journal and I began to write. I started with tear-soaked pages and shaky, unreadable handwriting, but the more that I wrote, the clearer the writing became, and the drier my pages were. I had finally found my purpose, my optimism. And from that day on, I decided that I was going to use my voice, written and spoken, to let other people know that they are not alone in their struggle. Optimism has helped me realize that as human beings, we are going to face difficulties. We live in a chaotic and drama-filled world, but that does not mean that it's over. It wasn't over for me, and it isn't over for you. And let me clarify, failure is not an option. But to be more correct, stopping at failure isn't an option. It's okay to cry. It's okay to have a bad day, but get back up. Listen to your own inner optimist and get up. I've discovered the optimism within me, and hopefully after listening to me speak, you finally begin to discover yours. There's a seed in all of us, but it will not bloom until we nurture it. Thank you. Testing.
Speaker C.
Discovering the optimism within me. When I was 8 years old, my parents took me on a vacation to California. One of my most vivid memories is seeing a giant sequoia tree. Under its massive height, I remember it well, a tiny sapling was trying to grow in the shade. 6 years later, as a relatively small 5'1" athlete on my volleyball team, I looked across the net at our very first round tournament opponents, my chance to prove myself as a freshman. And I saw
huge sequoias. Oh, I wondered, was I supposed to compete against these giants, these Goliaths? But then I remembered that little sapling, which, though overshadowed by the giants, had the potential within to grow large and prosper. So I took a deep breath, saw the sapling in my mind's eye, and fired up my optimism. That's what it means to discover the optimism in yourself, to realize that you can stretch yourself and touch the sky, that the power is in you. Or, as Dorothy says in The Wizard of Oz, there's no place like home. I must admit, it's not easy to be an optimist, both in the world at large or in a teenager's smaller world. On the world scene, the Russia-Ukraine war continues to stretch its tendrils into the rest of the world and my home city, where just this past January, around 90 to 100 Ukrainian troops began training on missile defense systems. Then there's disease. As humans move into more and more wild spaces, diseases such as COVID-19 can appear and randomly kill millions, even a strong and vigorous person. For example, just such a person, the boys soccer coach in my high school, was struck down 1 year ago. And of course, there's no revelation that gun violence is at an all-time high and the headlines are full of mass shootings. For example, since the beginning of 2023, there have been more mass shootings than there have been days in that time period. And accordingly, in my school, we have had 3 to 4 armed intruder drills every year. Sometimes it seems that the world at large is on fire and that no amount of optimism can quench it. The same could be said of the world of a teenager. Sometimes, at my school, the smoke from vaping and lighting up weed seems to obscure the glow of optimism. Sometimes, at my school, the thunder of vulgar and profane language seems to drown out any chorus of optimism. Sometimes, at my school, disrespect for authority seems to infect classrooms and teams and sicken the healthy vigor of optimism. Sometimes, at my school, apathy for academic excellence and achievement seems to deaden the touch and grasp of those who would rather reach out for optimism. Sometimes, at my school, it seems that pessimism sprouts from the very educational ground where optimism should and would love to grow. That's why I like to think of myself as a sapling among sequoias, as a tenacious force in the face of giant obstacles, as a ray of sunlight in an often too dark world. I find it comforting and reassuring to know that the treasure of optimism is not buried in some dark cave, but rather is patiently waiting in my heart and soul for me to see it and seize it. As Glinda, the good witch, says to Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, "You've always had the power, my dear. You just had to learn it yourself." Optimism has become my yellow brick road. It has led me to Optimist International, and I can't wait to visit the many emerald cities in my future life's journeys. Thank you.
Test, test. 1, 2, 3.
Speaker D.
When discovering the optimism in me, I think about the optimism we feel in elementary school. It was 5th grade, and I decided to run for the most important political position available, president. Well, 5th grade student council president. I ran on a platform of longer recess, less homework, and of course, bringing back nap time. My proposals were well-researched and popular. I thought for sure I would be able to bring home the prize, but I had an opponent. Now, I don't want to name names, but Brad also ran for class president. I knew this was serious. So I did the only thing I knew how to. I made a PowerPoint showcasing all my high-level opinions. Brad had no PowerPoint or political vision. Brett bought donuts for the whole class. And he won. My optimism had diminished. And I know I'm not the only one. According to research from the American University of Public Affairs, young women are far less likely than young men to have seriously contemplated running for political office or even considered elected office a desirable position in the first place. Now, I don't want to say I told you so, but after Brad's great political victory, he was a tremendous disappointment. I'm still optimistic that I would have done a better job. When examining elections, we can see that women are running for office more and more, yet their numbers are still far behind their male counterparts. Women are continuously being sidelined in critical decision-making. According to UN Women, there are only 28 countries in the entire world where women serve as heads of government. At this rate, experts estimate that gender equality in the highest positions of power will not be reached for another 130 years. And I just can't wait that long. So, what can I do about it? Where can I find this road to optimism? In order to find the optimism in all of us, we all must start young. If we encourage girls like me from a young age to be optimistic in their voices, they will be more likely to speak out when they think something should change. This growth in the female voice will propel more women into positions of leadership. Women in politics matter now more than ever. With gendered legislation crashing across our country, female perspectives will help equalize our world. BBC reports that in the 2020 presidential election, a woman was chosen as vice president. And in the US midterm election in November, 12 women were elected to serve as governors, shattering gender norms everywhere. This growth of women in politics makes me confident that my generation can extend our efforts in building a more equitable society for every single person, regardless of uncontrollable factors such as race, sexuality, and gender. We will continue the efforts our mothers and grandmothers have made in building this equal world. And the best way for me to make my mark on the world is to be optimistic in my voice and the transformations it can bring. Now that I'm older, I've put this whole Brad situation behind me. I'm not bitter, as you can tell. And recently, I've been thinking about running for political office again. Maybe something even bigger than 5th grade student council president. To continue my road to optimism, I will follow in the footsteps of legendary diplomat and politician, Madeleine Albright, when she said, "It took me a while to get my voice, but now that I have it, I am never going to be silent again." And none of us should be. I am immensely optimistic that with my voice and all of yours, we can all create a better world. Thank you. Am I on? Test, test. That's good. Projecting.
Speaker E.
Discovering the optimism within me. Picture this. You're a preschooler sitting down to watch Barney, and your 5 older brothers, who are old enough to know better, they stop you and they say, "Why are you watching Barney when you could be watching the iconic big screen adaptation of J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, a PG-13 movie with orcs and stabbing that's totally suitable for you, a 4-year-old. Now, fast forward 10 years, and you're still watching Lord of the Rings. And for the 13th time, you hear Sam Gamgee say that there's some good in the world, Mr. Frodo, and it's worth fighting for. And for the first time, you really believe it. Or you're listening to your dad tell stories from his childhood in the Philippines, dirt poor with 9 siblings and a dog in a 2-bedroom apartment. And you think, if he can overcome that, I can overcome my chemistry class. Or you're just reading a good book, and that book puts things in perspective and makes you realize that your life is actually pretty beautiful. That's my story. And isn't that fascinating? The stories that I grew up with became my own. Today, I'll be talking about how we should focus on the good stories. Why? Because I discovered the optimism within me by looking at the optimism around me. First, why is it important that we focus on the good stories? People like to think that it doesn't really matter what you read or watch or listen to. It's just books, it's just TV, it's just fiction, it's not important. But what you take in is what you become. As an old proverb goes, tell me what you read and I'll tell you who you are. I used to relax by watching political commentators, and they would take the worst of the other side and criticize just that. I ate this up. But it never actually made me relax. In fact, it just riled me up. It fed me this idea that I was doing something right when all I was doing was getting more angry and less productive. And I see this everywhere. I know people who watch the news religiously, and they always seem just a little angry, argumentative, sometimes basing their whole personality around politics and all the things that are wrong. And the reason that that's all they talk about is because that's all they hear. But don't worry, the inverse is also true. On the days that I spend my free time reading a good book, as opposed to browsing angry YouTube videos, my hope and productivity shoot up. Because the stories I take in become a part of me. And that's why we need good stories. So, what are good stories? Well, let me start by telling you what they're not. Good stories are not stories with no bad things. They're not children's books with little conflict and few problems. Good stories are like Lord of the Rings, or the Wingfeather Saga, or the Bible. One of my current favorites is Les Miserables. There's pain, there's consequences, there is death and destruction. But there is light. And there's this underlying idea that good things happen to good people. When you're looking for a good story, look for the stories that have a happy ending for the good people. There are some books that I used to love when I was younger until I realized just what they were teaching. Because those books said that in the real world, bad things happen to good people, and the story ends that way. Now, it's true that bad things happen to good people, but that's not how the story ends. It's true that life can be unfair. Sometimes good people get hurt, really hurt, but that's not how the story ends. As optimists, we have to believe that. I discover the optimism within me by looking at the optimism around me. Be it watching Lord of the Rings for the 25th time, listening to my dad talk about his childhood, or just reading a good book that my friend recommended, that's what keeps me hoping. That's what keeps us all hoping. What you consume will make or break your optimism. So treat it like that. Bad things will happen to you. But if you've read the right books, then you know that's not how the story ends. Thank you.
Test, test, test. 3.
Contestant F.
Discovering the optimism within me. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to take you all on a journey through time, a journey as I find my glass to be half full. Growing up with such inspirational role models has truly helped to shape me into who I am today. My 2 loving parents have always supported my hopes and dreams and have worked very hard for the lives they've created for our family. They've shared their wisdom, values, and beliefs with me as I've grown up over my years. Living in a politically active family and community has also greatly influenced my own desires and motivations, instilling me with this strong moral compass to help others and always do the right thing. However, I've found that even when surrounded with all this positivity and opportunity, that optimism just does not begin with others. Rather, optimism is a battle each day that begins in oneself. See, throughout middle school, I often felt challenges of fitting in, finding friends, making connections, just belonging. After years of harsh comments and bullying, I saw my glass to be half empty. Oftentimes, I feel as though we've forgotten how to be nice nowadays, how to give and receive a compliment and give some praise when it's due. Instead, I feel as though we've replaced it with jealousy, lewd comments, and outright bitterness. Don't you think that dress looks funny? His hair's too long. Her makeup's too cakey, and they are way too loud. Wait, you actually like them? Isn't it weird that she's here? It's not. I felt myself falling into this cycle, and I watched as the people close to me, my friends, would laugh and judge other people, but I felt no better about myself than I did before. I realized I had to find the optimism within myself by myself and set out to do just that, seeking out new, positive, and fun environments, leaving my old toxic habits in the past. Then came high school, when I thought I might find some purpose in the student council. Finally, a group where I was able to have fun and felt like I belonged, only to be rudely interrupted by an extended spring break. As you all can imagine, like many schools across the nation, optimism at my small campus was at an all-time low. The teachers were stressed out, students reckless and unmotivated, no one wanted to be there,
and no one wanted to gather and congregate like we once did. It was a dreary, sad environment, and I didn't like it. No one liked going. So I decided I wanted to try and change things. So this past year, I ran for student council president with the sole mission of restoring that positive campus culture environment that once was. And I think I've done a pretty good job of doing so since winning that election. I was ecstatic at first to host events, create dress-up days, all the way to homecoming, anything for students to feel a part of our campus. But I was often met with a challenge from before. See, if we weren't going to do things the way we did before COVID, well, why were we doing them at all? What was the point in even trying? And it surely was frustrating when people couldn't set aside their fears of failure, their fears of rejection, and think outside the box. Try something new and exciting. But deep down, I always knew and remembered the reason of why I was doing what I did: to restore that positive campus culture environment and make it fun to go to school again. Optimism is a mindset. And so rather than waking up each day craving the validation of others, I finally woken up and I'm optimistic about choosing myself. My glass is half full. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, your Southwest Region contestants. Let's give them a big round of applause. I'm going to turn over the mic to the contestants who are going to introduce themselves to us. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what grade you're in, who you brought with you, where you're from, a little bit about your future aspirations, and any thank yous that you would like to give to anyone. Here you go.
Hello, my name is Sadie Davis. I'm 15. I'm going into 10th grade. I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. I have my mom with me. And I wanted to say thanks to my mom for coming out here. Thanks to my dad for keeping my little brother. And thanks to my 9th grade CLU teacher for inspiring me to do this and getting me into this and not letting me quit even though I was stressed out. So thank you, Mr. Wade.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jade Coleman. I am 16 years old. I am representing Houston, Texas. I am a rising junior at Hightower High School. And first, I would like to give a thanks to my mom and everyone that came out to support me. I would also like to thank Miss Judy and Miss Marilyn for helping me prepare for this contest. And I would also like to give a shout out to my brother and my dad and also my stepdad for helping me prepare for this contest. And I would just like to say that the purpose for me coming up here today is to spread awareness to other people who have been going through hard times. I want to be that voice for the people in my community and the other little girls like me that have a hard time. And I want to show them that you have a purpose in this world. You matter. And that is what I stand for. Thank you.
My name is Isha Kata. I am a rising 10th grader in Lawton, Oklahoma. I go to Eisenhower High School. I'm here with my dad who drove 9 hours for me to get here. So thank you for that. I would like to thank both of my parents, actually, my mom too, for helping me get prepared for this contest, and my speaking coach, Dr. Fruman, for introducing me to the Optimist International and getting me ready for this contest. Let's see what else. I want to go into medicine for university, and yeah.
Hello, I'm Danny Schultz. I am from Wyoming and I just graduated. And now I'm going to be going to Casper College and studying secondary education in English literature. And who I have with me today is my lovely mother over there. And let's see, I want to thank obviously my mom. She's my best friend. I love her. And my speech and debate coach, Mr. Viney. He's amazing. And my family, of course. And also the Cheyenne Optimist Club for getting me into this and everyone who came here today. So thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Mary Lou Cavana. I am from Dallas, Texas, and I just graduated. So I'm going to go to the University of Dallas in the fall. It's a little liberal arts campus, which most people haven't heard of. What was next? Right, I'd like to thank my mom and my speech coach. She's over there. And also my dad and my brothers for just supporting me throughout my life. I'm really blessed to have them with me. And future plans, I have no idea. It's a liberal arts college, so I'll decide later.
Hello, my name's William Fenstermacher. I'm from El Paso, Texas, and I also just graduated high school. I plan to attend the University of Texas at El Paso in the fall and study psychology. I'm here today with my mom, dad, and sister, my whole family. So I'm really glad they came out with me. And I want to say a special thank you to the Cielo Vista Optimist Club for just pushing us to have this opportunity, and any other optimists here today, because this has been just such a fun journey. And I'm very grateful for all the support that I've received along the way. Thank you.
Okay, if the contestants will move down front so we can get some pictures. There will be a 10-minute break in between our contests. So thank you.
Go ahead and just speak into it. Let's hear your voice.
Test.
Judge 2, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
I would take that as a yes.
Yeah, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hear me? Hear me?
Judge 2, we're going to have speaker B test her lavalier. Let us know you can hear her.
A, B, C. Is that better? D, E.
Yes, I can hear.
F, G. Wait, I was supposed to keep talking. Okay.
I can hear.
You are ready to go.
Welcome, good afternoon, and welcome to the Middle America Region competition. I am Janet Lloyd, and I am currently serving on the Optimist International Board of Directors. And it is my responsibility to remind you of the 3 rules. 1, no cell phones, make sure they're off or on mute. Number 2, there's no coming or going while the contestants are speaking. And number 3, I know it kills us all, but we cannot applaud until they're all finished at the end, and then we will recognize them as a group. So with that, we will start with contestant A.
Discovering the optimism within me. It wasn't until I reached high school that I discovered that each and every one of us has optimism deep within. Sometimes we just have to find that one special thing that helps us unlock it. For me, that special thing was one of my school's student organizations. For the past 3 years, I've served as an officer in this organization, where I've grown my leadership capabilities and gained knowledge about the agricultural industry. If it weren't for my optimism, I never would have discovered this community and my passions that came along with it. Throughout the countless interviews I've done in this organization, one recurring question always sticks out to me. What motivates you, and how do you use it to motivate others? This is a question that goes hand in hand with the concept of optimism, because without the right motivation, how can we be optimistic? The organization is one in which students develop their potential to be leaders, strive to grow as individuals, and prepare themselves to be advocates for agriculture. My freshman year, I joined the organization, not quite knowing what was in store for my young mind. I attended conferences and participated in classes, but I always felt that something was missing. It was my drive, my inspiration, my motivation. I was already caught in a downward spiral that was draining my energy and slowing time. And then the unexpected happened. The world was hit by a pandemic. A week off of school soon turned into 2, and then 3, and then 4. My life was on pause. My friends, sports, and school were gone, and all of my optimism went with them. It wasn't until 3 months later that my chapter hosted officer interviews virtually. I was overjoyed that something good had finally come back into my life. I put on my dress clothes, logged on to the computer, and introduced myself. Hello, everyone. You have no idea how happy I am to finally see your faces once again. It was at that moment that I discovered what it meant to have passion. I had awoken my optimism. The 3 years that followed that moment have been the best ones of my life. With my recently adopted optimism and confidence, I was able to step out of my comfort zone, meet new friends, and even earn a spot at the district level of the organization, representing 25 different schools. My optimism has taken me places I had never thought possible, but most importantly, I was able to discover more about myself and how I can serve others using my dedication and experience. Discovering my optimism was the best thing that ever happened to me. My school's organization taught me that there's no purpose in hoping for a more plentiful future if we aren't going to put in the work right now, which is what kickstarted my love of advocating for soil conservation and regenerative agriculture. On social media, I frequently promote soil health platforms and share stories of new age agricultural techniques. Regenerative agriculture, which is when farmers use strategies to preserve resources for future generations, and soil health are two of the passions that my optimism helped me find. I show my hope for the future by encouraging others to step out of their comfort zone and get involved with important topics like these that impact our society. Using what my optimism has provided for me, I can now focus on making sure that others discover their optimism and use it to improve our society. On the journey I embarked upon with my relatively newfound optimism, I learned more than I could have ever imagined. I tried new things, stepped out of my comfort zone, and was able to help others uncover their passions. I encourage everyone to surround themselves with the people and objects that bring out their inner optimism. So now when you ask me, what motivates me and how do I use it to motivate others? I'll respond. What truly motivates me is the dream of a better future. What truly motivates me is being able to help others discover their passion. What truly motivates me is the optimism within.
Test, test, test. Does this work?
Speaker B.
When I was thinking about discovering the optimism within me, I concluded that I first needed to know what optimism truly is. So let's start there. I'd like to share my two favorite definitions of optimism. First, licensed clinical social worker Amy Morin said, quote, "Being optimistic means that you possess an overall positive outlook of the world, trusting that good things will happen and that people's desires will be fulfilled," end quote. Additionally, Winston Churchill once said, quote, "An optimist sees the opportunity in every difficulty," end quote. Now, when I was brainstorming for this speech with these ideas in mind, I asked myself, what do I do on a gloomy day when I'm in the depths of despair and I don't know where to find the light? Several ideas came to mind. Ice cream from Peach Wave, friends, family, movies, thinking about a positive future, and reasons I should be happy and optimistic. Then the thought occurred to me that more than half of these ideas were me simply consoling myself versus nurturing substantial bases of discovering optimism. There's a big difference between indulging in consolations that only last for the moment versus discovering the optimism within me. And I could not discover the optimism within myself if it were not for all of my positive surroundings that lift me up. I am most influenced by the adults in my life and my close friends. My grandpa has always had a sunny attitude. He finds an opportunity in every difficulty, especially at his job at a hardware store. One time when he was working in the store, the power went out and all the cash registers stopped working. Almost everyone but him was intimidated at the prospect of doing mental math to figure out how much everyone owed for everything they had bought. My grandpa was quite thrilled at the prospect of doing things the old-fashioned way. He looked at it as an opportunity to turn a hard situation into a positive one. And this is one of countless examples of my grandpa being optimistic. Another influential adult in my life is a mom that helps run our school group activities. One year I was on the planning committee for our field day. And after all of our hard work and preparation, the morning of the field day arrived and it started pouring rain. When we arrived at the field, it was soaked and muddy. But this mom just smiled and said, everyone will have so much fun getting dirty. And by the end of the day, they will all get to be so clean. I remember her optimism being very contagious that day. My friends also surround me with a positive atmosphere to help me discover the optimism within myself. I choose to spend time with most of my closest friends because they are always so happy, uplifting, and encouraging. They always greet me with a smile and a hug, and when I'm down, they show me a bright side and challenge me to believe in a positive outcome. I discover the optimism within myself by promoting positive thoughts and visions in difficult times or in the uncertain future that I have to face. Because the adults in my life are more experienced than I am, I can learn from them. I try to grow the same optimism they have within me so that my life is more positive. My friends help me do this by giving me a positive atmosphere to start in so that once I accomplish staying optimistic with them, I can go out into the world and spread true optimism wherever I go. Because the adults in my life have trailblazed perfect examples from me, I can learn from them. Having good friends and a positive atmosphere helps me stay optimistic. They help me see the opportunities in every difficulty. When I can discover the optimism within myself, I can positively impact my community. And as Winston Churchill said, see the opportunity in every difficulty, keeping myself in the light. Thank you.
Test, test, test. Test, test, test. You want Oh, test, test, test. Okay. Speaker.
Speaker C.
Discovering the optimism within me has always been a bit of a challenge. You see, I always steered clear of being optimistic because I didn't like the idea of thinking everything in life is positive. I mean, we all know people we could describe as annoyingly optimistic. You know, the type to say something like, everything happens for a reason, when something terrible happens, like a pet dying. Like, come on, it feels like a slap in the face, but with sunshine and rainbows. But then I discovered that's not even actually optimism. Instead, it's just being plain delusional. So to better elaborate on that today, let's first understand what optimism truly is. Next, why we should choose to be optimistic. And finally, how we can all discover the optimism within us. So to begin with, let's understand what optimism truly is. Now, vocabulary.com defines optimism as seeing the bright side of things. You lose your wallet, you break your phone, you fail your test, and you're still absolutely delighted. Yeah, frankly, that's a load of garbage. Instead, that definition better fits toxic positivity, where you believe no matter how difficult a situation is, you should remain positive. Very often, toxic positivity can get mixed up with optimism.
But true optimism isn't wishful or fantasy thinking. Instead, Martin Siegelman, an accredited American psychologist, defines optimism as reacting to problems with a sense of confidence. More specifically, optimistic people believe they have the confidence to get through negative events. So in other words, to be optimistic isn't to ignore and overlook negative events, but believe we have the strength to get through them. So then why should we even choose to be optimistic? I mean, I could go on the laundry list of all the mental and physical health benefits, but instead, let's put it like this. We live in a world where media is this nonstop chain of negative news. Ever we're seeing climate change, war threats, mortality rates, epidemics, so on and so forth. The bottom line is we live in a world surrounded by darkness. It's out of our control, but when all of that, plus our own personal stress becomes intertwined, it can be so easy to feel small and overwhelmed. But with the right mindset of optimism, it can be that light to bring us that feeling of comfort and safety when fear, confusion, and uncertainty plagues our minds. Because you see, optimism is the ability to take control of chaos. So then how do we discover the optimism within us? Well, let's first clarify one thing. Optimism is a progress. It's not going to happen overnight, but here's a couple of steps we can take to start. The first one is identifying positivity in our life. KidsHealth.org offered just to take a couple of minutes out of your day to reflect on anything good happening. Something I find helpful is writing down anything and everything good happening, even the small things. For example, watching an episode of my favorite show or a funny joke my friend told. You see, habits like this deconstruct the notion that positive moments have to be something huge, something that make up for all the terrible things happening in our life. When in reality, positive moments, no matter how small, all carry value. Our next step is realizing that setbacks are temporary. When things go wrong, it's easy to feel like it's permanent. And that's how the flood of negative feelings and thoughts can come in. And I'm sure we've all had our share of that feeling before. But we're all here now, right? Which means that life keeps going. By reminding ourselves that life keeps going, the world keeps spinning, we can have hope to move on. After all, to be optimistic isn't to pretend like everything's okay. It's to accept that things might not be, but we ourselves maybe one day can be. And our final step is to research and practice on our own. These are just 2 examples out of thousands out there. And everyone's different, and not everything can work in every situation. But by researching and practicing on our own, we can surely create progress. So today, after understanding what optimism truly is, why we should choose to be optimistic, and how we can all discover the optimism within us, hopefully we gain a better understanding on how to become an optimist, because I am positive we can do it.
Test, test, test. Test, test, test. Speaker D. Discovering the optimism within me has been and will continue to be a lifelong pursuit. It's also imperative to high school students today. According to the CDC, in 2021, over 42% of students felt persistently sad or hopeless, and 29% experienced poor mental health. I was one of them. I barely remember my sophomore year because of what scientists call pseudo-dementia, or memory loss caused by depression. I felt like no one cared about me. I felt like my life wasn't worth living. I got injured and I couldn't swim for months. So why am I still here standing in front of you? How did I heal? Discovering the optimism within me has been a process that requires changing the way I think about happiness. It seems counterintuitive, but we have to stop trying so hard to be happy. First, I had to learn to stop pursuing happiness. I wrote a poem about a year ago about the recovery from depression, and although it's rather pessimistic, I think it highlights the exhaustion of the pursuit of happiness really well. Here's how it begins. Happiness is a strange thing. It might take you by surprise like a flash of light in a dark room. But most often it must be coaxed, like a gentle flame on a windy night. You blow and beg and plead as you desperately try to shelter it from the wind, but nothing seems to work and it just won't burn, and that exhaustion you feel when you finally have a flicker of flame, only for it to be blown out once again. I think this is a very common feeling. We're trying so hard to be happy that we can't find it. We say, if I do this, then I'll be happy, and it usually leads to disappointment. We don't find happiness where we expect to, and it feels easier to lose all hope. Instead, we must cultivate a fulfilling life and notice the good things as they happen. So what is a fulfilling life? Things like healthy, positive relationships with others and spending time in nature. This will improve our quality of life, thus making it easier to be positive. According to the Mental Health Foundation, spending time in nature increases our happiness while decreasing our depression and anxiety. When I was injured, I tried to find ways to get outside and get moving, such as going on walks. This made me generally happier, thus making it easier to be optimistic. Next, I had to change the way I think about my life. This includes acknowledging the negatives without being pessimistic. Negative emotions are a part of everyday life. We fail to achieve our goals, others hurt us, we lose loved ones. But being optimistic doesn't mean we suppress these feelings. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "Only when it is dark enough can you see stars." Likewise, we have to experience grief, pain, anger, frustration, so we can better experience joy. The key to discovering optimism within ourselves is to view these negative emotions not as setbacks, but as opportunities for growth. BYU psychology professor Jared S. Warren states that if we approach periods of negative emotion and grief in a healthy way, we can experience a greater capacity for joy. Now, just because I acknowledge the negatives in my life doesn't mean I'm focused on every bad thing that happens. I try to focus on the positives. It can be hard to find the positives in life, especially when you're struggling with mental health or even just going through a particularly rough time. I try to look for the little things to bring me a little more joy each day. Things like a small act of kindness, a good song, a good grade, a beautiful bird outside my window. Over time, I have found greater appreciation for life, and suddenly life seems worth living again. I find I'm so focused on the positives that the negatives aren't so overwhelming anymore. Another way I focus on the positives is to acknowledge my successes. This can be something as big as getting into my dream college or as small as making my bed this morning. It can be easy to think of all the things we are failing to do, but if we celebrate every win, it can be easier to find the motivation to keep trying. Over time, as we change the way we think about happiness, we can experience greater appreciation for life and greater optimism for the future. But the key point here is that it takes time. Professor Warren explains that optimism requires patience and consistent effort. Nothing happens overnight. Be patient with yourself, even when you're struggling, and one day you will realize that you are at last truly happy. Thank you.
Where you read? And your speaking voice. Yes, 1, 2, 3.
Test 1, 2, 3.
Speaker E.
Discovering the optimism within me has actually been quite a difficult journey, especially when circumstances in life can make it hard for us to see the bright side of things. For example, for me, I personally saw that honestly, as a kid, optimism came a bit more easier. I basically had that childish sense of optimism where you not just hope for, but almost expect good things to happen to you just because you haven't encountered anything negative yet. But like for most people, this changed for me as I grew up. And for me, that moment was when I was in a life-threatening car accident. Now, those few moments were enough for me to realize that a person can do every single thing right, but still have bad things happen to them. So from then on, I became scared when it came to things like cars and driving. And instead of still having this optimistic and hopeful type of approach, I now subconsciously held this negative type of outlook, which stayed with me for a long time and even throughout my teen years. And most can agree that being a teen and getting your driver's license is an exciting milestone. Finally feeling that sense of independence and freedom feels great, but that wasn't the case for me, which ultimately made me realize that if I held on to this negative perspective, then I would never get over this fear in order to be happy and yeah, maybe even calmly drive a car someday. And so surprisingly enough, that's where optimism can make a difference. And so in my journey towards finding this optimism, I've seen that two ways work the best. The first and most important being that I need to open myself up to accepting and acknowledging the optimism that surrounds me. And only after this can I move on to the next step, which is now surrounding myself with those optimistic people. Now, a lot of times just in life, if you take a look yourself, you could see that people will have the best things going on in their life, but it won't matter a bit to them because they're not opening up to it first. Now, this can be hard since it basically means changing your mindset. For example, for me, I have a very hard time accepting the things that I do good. But the second I do the opposite and I mess up, well, then I get basically obsessed with why I wasn't good enough or smart enough. And that's neither a healthy nor optimistic way of thinking. So currently, I've been trying to change this by maybe just giving myself a pat on the back when I do a good job. Or if I mess up, then I'll just take a step back and focus on what I can do better next time. And it's not just me who sees optimism as something that you have to open yourself up to first, but there are also others. Take Jim Carrey as an example, who's not just a famous actor, but also is he one of the optimistic people. He even once said that life opens up opportunities to you, and you either take them or you stay afraid of taking them. And that just goes to show that we're constantly surrounded by opportunities for good and optimism, but we just need to be willing to take that initial step forward and reach for them. And so besides from having this optimistic type of mindset, it also helps to surround yourself with those optimistic people. Now, a lot of times, not just in school, but also in life, I've seen that sadly, the best way to make friends can sometimes be by complaining. Even saying something simple like, I'm so tired, I absolutely hate it here, can make you sound so much more negative and pessimistic, even though sure, for 1 second, you may sound a bit more relatable, but is that worth it in the long run? No. Instead, it pays off more to surround yourself with those positive people so you can maybe act similarly too, which has been proven by studies. Take, for example, a study done by Dr. Christakis of Harvard and Dr. Fowler of the University of California. Their studies show that people who tend to surround themselves with more cheerful people will have a happier demeanor and a better sense of well-being, which just creates a cycle of goodness all around. And so currently though, while saying all this, I know that I have not yet reached my full potential for optimism, but that's all right because I'm trying. I mean, in my defense, I have had my whole entire life to falling into this rhythm of being negative and loving to complain. But right now, I'm just trying to maybe have an open mindset towards the idea of optimism and just surrounding myself with those optimistic people. And actually, while thinking about this topic, I thought back to something my dad used to say when I was younger. Whenever I felt sad, or especially after that car accident I was talking about, my dad would always try to make me feel more optimistic by saying this phrase in our native language, Punjabi, which means that this moment is just a fraction of the moments in your life. So all of these ups and downs are going to pass no matter what. So what it comes down to is, will you face your issues with negativity or optimism? And so I hope that going forward, we can all keep this in mind and discover the optimism within us. Thank you.
Test.
That's a big deal. I can hear.
Test, test, test.
Speaker F.
When I heard the topic, discovering the optimism within me, I stopped and thought, I'm a pessimist. In fact, my parents call me the most painstaking, pessimistic pessimist to ever suffer from passionate pessimism. Perfect. I used to think that I earned the right to be pessimistic given everything I've been through. I spent all my time hating school, hating the people around me, hating myself. Essentially, I hated the world. I was a 24/7 Grinch until I realized that I'd had enough. While I wish it hadn't taken me 16 years to understand that pessimism wasn't helping my problems, I'm glad I eventually did. Let me tell you that discovering the optimism in a person who has a heart 2 sizes too small is no easy feat, but hey, the first step to change is admitting you have a problem, right? So let's go through my 3-step plan to overcoming my grinchiness and becoming the most powerful optimist the world has ever seen. And maybe you'll learn a thing or two along the way. First, we'll travel down from our house in the mountains, head down to Whoville, and find out what makes me want to be a pessimist. Now, I'm not going to stand up here and give you a list of all the bad things that have happened to me because frankly, that has nothing to do with the point I'm trying to make. But according to Psychology Today, pessimism develops as a way to cope with bad external forces like abuse, injuries, bad breakups, etc. So maybe those bad things that I'm not going to mention could be the reason I look at the world like it's a rotting apple. But the Berkeley Wellbeing Institute states that pessimism could also be genetic. So maybe I have my mother to blame for this glass half empty and evaporating as we speak mindset. But if we think about it, wouldn't blaming other things that I have no control over still be pessimistic? At the end of the day, I have no one to blame but myself. So how do I fix that? In order to find my inner optimist, next we need to meet up with Cindy Lou Who and see how I can be more optimistic in my daily life. According to teenhealth.org, to be optimistic, you need to practice 6 things. So now's the time for something I like to call the anti-pessimism speed run. Notice good things that they happen. I'm doing pretty good with this speech. Train your mind to believe you can make good things happen. I can keep doing good with this speech. Don't blame yourself when things go wrong. It's not my fault if I forget the next sentence. When good things happen, give yourself credit. I remembered this sentence, go me. Remind yourself that setbacks are temporary. Just like my pessimism, notice how people talk about themselves. I think I'll try that one later. I'm feeling more optimistic already. The world is perfect and absolutely nothing can go wrong. I think this is the part in the speech where things go wrong.
Okay, so maybe wrong isn't the right word, but this is the part in the speech where things get serious. Because my third step to optimism requires my heart to grow. And to do that, I need to face the truth. We've had fun so far, but let's get down to business. I've learned that constant pessimism isn't the solution to my problems, but neither is mindless optimism. Ron Siegel, assistant professor of psychology at Harvard Medical School, states that positive psychology is not about denying the difficult emotions. It's about opening to what is happening here and now and cultivating and savoring the good in your life. If you say that you are always optimistic, you are one of two things: a liar or just as bad as a pessimist. Mindless optimism can lead to just as many problems as mindless pessimism. It's important to address both the good and the bad in the world in order to stay true to yourself. Blue Horizon counseling refers to mindless optimism as toxic positivity. Toxic positivity dismisses the reality of a situation. It can fail to value the diversity of human experience, the use of mindless platitudes like, don't worry too much, everything will work out, or it'll be fine. Optimism doesn't just mean we ignore the bad. We have to be willing to see it and accept it. You are not a pessimist for seeing that you're struggling, because frankly, it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to feel like the world is closing in on you, because that's not what makes you a pessimist. How you deal with those emotions is what decides that. Instead of sitting in bed all day wallowing in self-pity, optimism is acknowledging that maybe not all problems can be fixed with a simple, everything will work out. Optimism is reaching out to your friends and family for help, giving yourself some affirmations, or doing something you love. Optimism is seeing the bad, accepting it, and working through it. So maybe my statement at the beginning of the speech was wrong. I'm not a pessimist. I'm not the most powerful optimist the world has ever seen, but I don't have a heart 2 sizes too small, and I can see the good in the world. I see the good in the people who I pass in the hallway during school. I see the good in my friends who might be struggling. I see the good in you, and I see the good in me. But most importantly, I see the good in the Grinch at the top of the mountain, who maybe just hasn't found the optimism within himself yet.
Okay, will you please join me in thanking and appreciating the great job all these contestants did? And I'll have you guys come with me. We'll line up on stage. Right about there. Okay, now we're going to get to know all of you. If you want to tell us your name and the grade you're in or your age, where you're from, and if you brought someone with you that you'd like to recognize, or maybe someone at home you'd like to recognize, and your future education plans.
My name's Charlie Lewis. I'm from the small town of Ashland, Missouri. I just graduated from Southern Boone County High School earlier this year. And next month, I plan to start my first semester of college at the University of Missouri, where I'll be studying environmental sciences with an emphasis in atmosphere. Today, I have my dad, Jay Lewis, with me, who drove me a whopping 2 hours, which is not much compared to some other people. And I want to thank him for that. And I also want to thank my coach, John Travalos, in the back from the Ashland Optimist, for all his help in preparing my speech.
Hello, my name is Ann Olson. I'm 16 and I will be a sophomore next year. I would like to thank my mom for bringing me here today and yesterday, and my family for driving with me all the way to St. Louis. Only 4 hours, again, not as long as some of you, but still, I like the sacrifice that they gave me. I'd like to thank my Olathe Noon Optimist Club for being my main supporters, as well as the other clubs that are included in my district. And as far as future plans, I obviously still have a little longer to decide what I'm going to do, but I'm thinking like physical therapy or maybe being a teacher or something like that. So
Hi, my name is Maria Raza. I just graduated and I'm an upcoming freshman at University of Illinois. I'm majoring in environmental science. I want to thank my parents for being here and always like taking me to all these tournaments. The Optimists for such a wonderful opportunity, and the Belleville Optimists for being such a great support. My English teacher, because I would have literally not known about this if it wasn't for him, and my speech coaches, because I wouldn't be able to stand here if it wasn't for them.
Hello, my name is Caitlin Nielsen, and I just graduated from Zionsville High School, and I plan to attend Purdue University in the fall to also study environmental science. And I'd like to thank my mom and dad who are here with me for their support, and also my speech teacher who also introduced me to this contest and encouraged me to enter, and also all of my friends that are watching at home.
Hi there. My name's Sakleen Dami, and I'm 18, and I just graduated this year from Avon High School. And in the fall, I'll be attending IUPUI. And I want to thank my parents and my little brother, since they had to suffer through hours of me practicing. And I'd also like to thank the Avon Optimist Club. Thank you a lot for the opportunity. And also my speech teacher, Mrs. Langford. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity and introducing me to this. So yeah.
Hello, I'm Sav Jordan. I'm going into my senior year. I'm from Raymore, Missouri, 4 hours away. And I'd like to thank my parents and my two brothers for coming down here with me and for always coming to my theater stuff. And, for future plans, I would like to be a theater professor and help other kids know that it's not really that hard to speak.
Okay, and now we can do our picture time. If I want to take a step down. And we can have the paparazzi come and get some great photos. Okay, we'll take a 10-minute break. Thank you.
In about 2 minutes, if we could have our West Coast participants come over to the staging area.
You can step right out there and Craig will ask. We'll help you.
Hear you, good speaking voice, say test, 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 ABC.
Test, 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 ABC.
Have a seat there, you can stand back here and pace.
I'll probably pace. Oh.
I love. They're leaving.
Okay, can I have everybody take their seats, please? We are getting ready to start the West Coast region. Just some housekeeping rules. Obviously, while our speakers are presenting, there is no movement to leave or enter the room. If you need to leave or enter, please do it between speakers. Second of all, if you have any cell phones, please make sure they're turned off or on silent mode. And we have to remember, and I know this is extremely difficult, no applause for individual presenters. We have to wait until the end so everybody gets the applause at the end. Okay? We ready?
Yeah. Test, test, test again.
Test, test, test again. There you go.
Ready?
For the West Coast region, speaker A.
Discovering the optimism within me, a hard pill to swallow for many of us, and me in particular, is the fact that pessimism is easier than optimism. It can feel natural for many of us. But making that difficult decision to accept optimism into your life, it is like getting glasses. You can finally see every beautiful part of the world for the first time. So that is why discovering the optimism within me has changed my life. Growing up in a big house with many big issues such as addiction, I tend to prepare for disappointment. And while that may make me more prepared for a worst case scenario, that leads directly towards loss of hope. And the journey to hope, it is perilous and it's long. But that little glimmer that you carry with yourself when waging your bets on a situation, that is where it starts. And then trusting yourself to win, that is where it grows. Because I found optimism, even in the most negatively redundant situations, has renewed my faith in the future. Alcoholism is a common theme within my life and often is a great source of pessimism. This disease is a hereditary issue with my close family, and I have had to watch loved ones struggle with it all of my life. It infected everyone that cared for them for loss of hope. For once you deal with a situation once, it's hard to find the pattern won't continue. But the community that my family and I built around that shaped us. I have learned a lesson that has taught me that even in times of lost hope, I can turn that pessimism into standards for myself. Because the hope I lost for others was the way that I learned to have hope for myself. Now I'm still someone who often struggles with coping with failure. I am my worst enemy and my biggest critic. And that hopelessness, it builds and builds until I'm sure there is no more hope in the world. The people I can trust to always bring me back from that, though, my loved ones. Time and time again, it was my friends and family who showed me my optimism by making me aware of just how much faith they had within me. For example, mock trial is one of my favorite extracurricular activities, and I've since worked hard, and I built a place for myself in that group this year. But that's not how it started. Originally, I was rejected from my high school chapter, and when I found this out, I was extremely disappointed. Not in anyone but myself. Maybe I was too old. Maybe I didn't have enough experience. Maybe I just wasn't good enough. While all not entirely realistic situations, that rejection caused a loss of faith within myself. That was until, with the help of my mother, I learned it was time to stop moping about what I couldn't change. Because the future, that is still something I can have a part in, as long as I don't lose my optimism within it. Now, I'm sure we've all heard the tagline of the American dream. That dream and the optimism my grandparents found within it brought them to America from Mexico and helped bear generations of optimism. But optimism didn't just start with the American dream. In the times that they faced poverty, abuse, and racism, they lost that optimism. They returned to Mexico, they stopped speaking Spanish at home, and they lost themselves in what others' version of the American dream was. And I'm grateful they eventually came back and fought for a place here their own way. I have since worked hard to fix what they bent in their efforts to conform. I have found optimism in renewing that appreciation for our culture. Because I have a dream my descendants will not face that same conflict of origin. I'm hopeful that they will feel comfortable within themselves. But you know, being hopeful doesn't come at expense to being practical. As I have learned, by putting in the work and putting in the effort, I turn hope into a practical reality. One day, I want to be an attorney at law because I believe I can be the change I want to see in the world. And frankly, I think the criminal justice system can use a little more optimism within it. And you know, I know I'll be a great one because I work hard. I participate in school activities, volunteer with law organizations, and continuously learn because I love it. And I know that by putting myself on the track to be the best I can now, that will put me on a further track to be the best I can later. Because that little girl in me that just wants to live up to that expectation of greatness knows I can do it. And the girl in middle school with the terrible fashion sense and a goal just making it through another day still saw past tomorrow into the future. And she knows I can do it too. And to the woman I presently am, the woman who has built up an assurance of progress through heart and desire for my abilities, there are no questions. She knows I will do it. By putting trust in myself and my ambitions, I turned and corroborated hope into a practical reality. And in turn, I discovered the optimism within myself. Thank you.
Test, test, test. ABC.
A little bit more.
ABC.
We're going up. Speaker B.
Throughout the years, discovering the optimism within me has been a challenge. I remember when I was younger, people would tell me I was cheery. I was the type of kid to fall down, scrape my knee, and be really excited about a cool scar. I never saw the glass as half empty or half full. I was just happy to have a glass of water. But over time, things changed. Scraped knees became stressful chemistry tests, and a glass that was once filled with water became overflowing with stress and anxiety. More and more, I lost that cheerful kid I once was. But eventually, in the face of the pandemic and with the undeniable stress of being a teenager, I found my smile again. Today, I find optimism through the 3 A's: appreciation, assistance, and application. The first way I find optimism is through appreciating every situation I'm put in. Before the pandemic, I was a competitive swimmer. However, because of COVID, all my classes stopped. When the first vaccines started coming out, my mom asked me if I wanted to start swimming again. But I said no, because I thought, what's the point? I'm not going to be good anymore. But my mom wouldn't take no for an answer. She threw me in the deep end, both figuratively and literally, and enrolled me in a new swim team where I was the worst in my level. But I had better coaches who were able to help me improve, and my new teammates were more encouraging. And so even though I was placed in this negative situation, this experience taught me one way we can all be optimistic is by realizing that we need to appreciate the negative situation, because you never know amazing experiences they could lead to. The second way I find optimism is by realizing that it's okay to ask for help and assistance. A few months ago, I was studying for a math test. Now, anyone who knows me knows that I am really bad at math. So as I was working, I kept on getting problems wrong. And at one point, I was so fed up with all my wrong answers, I put my head down on my desk and started crying over a math problem. But eventually, I got the courage to ask my dad to help me. And after that, I started getting more and more problems correct and understanding the concepts better. And this experience taught me one way we can be optimistic is by realizing that there will always be people around us to help and assist us if we need it. The final way I find optimism is by spreading my positivity to the people around me. My best friend is a figure skater for Team USA, takes all the advanced classes in school, and is undoubtedly under a lot of pressure. But every time I see her, she has a smile on her face. And when I'm feeling sad, she makes me feel better by telling me that everything will be okay. So I asked her, how does she stay positive under all that pressure? And she told me that making me feel better makes her feel better too. That for her, it's not just about being optimistic, but spreading that positivity to other people that truly makes her happy. Trust me, I know it's hard to be optimistic in a world where it feels like, what's the point? Or that you can't do anything right, or that everyone else is sad too. But I've learned that through noticing these small pieces of optimism in our world, we can be happier. Thank you.
Test. Test. Brilliant. Thank you.
Speaker C.
Discovering the optimism within me. Truly a daunting task. As the world grows colder, its helpless subjects become bitter and resentful towards the simple fact of existence. Several weeks ago, my closest friend comes to me in private and tells me he thinks he has what's called passive suicidal ideation. Now, my friend is not suicidal in the manner that he wants to actively end his life. However, he simply wouldn't mind if something else did it for him. Words could not describe how I felt in this moment. Because although I love this kid like a brother, I'd be lying if I said I hadn't felt this feeling before. In a world swirling with anger, hatred, and uncertainty, it's all too easy to find your head sinking below the water, which to me is subsequent proof that optimism shouldn't, nay, can't be found in the world, because ultimately the world is a variable you cannot control. Optimism must be discovered, founded, and fostered in the one variable you can, yourself. And within myself, I follow 2 rules every single day that help me discover optimism. Rule 1, don't worry about what you can't control. And rule 2, never complain. Let's get into it. Many Stoic philosophers, religious teachers, and disciplined monks all agree on the simple premise, don't worry about what you can't control. I personally follow the works of many great Stoic philosophers, such as Epictetus, Aristotle, Hippocrates. What they all have in common is the simple notion of the power of the mind. Now, for lack of better words, it's simply the idea that your outcome, outlook, and output on the world is all determined up here before it's determined out there. A very true statement, but also a very scary one. The reason it's scary is because worry has a very special power on the mind. It allows fear, anxiety, depression to take real estate within our mind. Such a powerful tool being held up by such negative emotions. And this makes it impossible to discover optimism. But what I say to that is vacate that real estate. Let go of the worry, get rid of it. Because if you're not having fear for the future, if you don't have anxiety for the future, and you don't worry about the future, you can have hope for the future. And isn't that what optimism really is? Hope for the future. Just don't worry, let it go. For my next rule, it's going to sound a little hypocritical, but please stay with me. Never complain. I know, we all do it. You guys do it, I do it. I'm not a saint, I'm not trying to be. But trust me, I hate it. I despise complaining because the second a complaint leaves your mouth, you've taken for granted every single thing that has allowed you to complain. Let me give some examples. Oh, I have too much homework. No, you get to have an education. Ooh, I'm cold. Well, you still have all your fingers and toes because it's not cold enough to freeze them off. You see, every single time a complaint leaves your mouth, you have insulted absolutely anyone who has it worse. And trust me, in this first world country, someone has it worse. The real reason I hate complaining is because every day I see someone walking the street complaining and having their bad day today, when I know their bad day is coming. This isn't going to sound very optimistic, but trust me, it's truly realistic. Everybody has a bad day coming, whether it be a loved one, family member, man, even a pet. Someone in your life will die, and then you will truly have a bad day. But until then, why waste your good days? I see someone having their bad day today when I know it's not their bad day, and it makes me mad because I know my bad day is coming. So I can rest assured that today is not it. So with these 2 simple rules, I can discover optimism for the future by simply not worrying about it. And I can discover optimism for today by realizing my bad day is coming and today is not it. And I hope anyone else can follow this simple rubric and discover optimism within themselves. Thank you. Test, 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 1, 2, test. Test 1, 2. You guys can hear me? Okay, great. Okay, thank you.
Our next speaker is Speaker D.
Discovering the optimism within me. Immigrating to North America was one of the most momentous events of my life. Through the process, there were the ups and there were the downs. However, the biggest lesson I learned from my experience is how an optimistic mindset, even in times of difficulty, is the key to taking action and making our future a better place. Now, when I was first informed by my parents that we would be moving to North America, I was excited. I never lived outside Asia before, and I was excited to see what life was like on the other side of the Pacific. I knew this was a special opportunity not offered to many, and I was ready. When we arrived at the airport, I felt a great sense of pride and privilege. I felt optimistic as a first-generation Asian immigrant. It felt like I had a great deal of responsibility to represent my people in a foreign country. Yet, as I was getting ready to board the plane and take on a life in North America, I started to sense a growing feeling of nervousness. What if they didn't accept my background? What if they didn't understand my culture? What if they made fun of my English? Eventually, the plane landed and we moved into our new life. We had a seamless transition. But just a few months after, the COVID pandemic hit, and many of those fears that I initially had began to come true. Having family back in Asia, we knew how serious the disease was, and we expected to be in lockdown for a while. However, what we didn't expect was the overwhelming hate towards the Asian population during the pandemic. Every single day, people who looked like me were discriminated, insulted, blamed for the pandemic, and even became victims of hate crimes. I still remember one story in particular that stuck out to me. Was a 92-year-old Asian man attacked based on his race. It was a scary time for the Asian population living in North America. The fear of being run over, the fear of beatdowns, the fear of spit landing on our faces lingered within us as we went about our lives. For me, as a new Asian immigrant, I began to fear even simple things like going outside for a walk with my family. The rise in Asian hate, combined with the social isolation due to COVID, put me in a pessimistic state of mind. As far as I was concerned, it was a hostile place, and I was alone. Here's when I realized I had two options. Either accept the status quo, or try to make a change. Now, I knew I couldn't just sit and watch my people continue to suffer. I knew I need to take a stance against anti-Asian hate and restore optimism back into the community. I took charge in the only way I knew how. I went onto my social media to express my frustration and raise awareness for anti-Asian hate. Through the power of social media, I began to realize that I wasn't alone, and many others were feeling the same way. Slowly, people began to open up, and the feeling of fear within the Asian community started to open up and transform to a sense of solidarity and optimism. From New York City to Vancouver, British Columbia, people just like me came together in support of the Asian population living in North America. Thousands of people believing in a better future and fighting for it. Standing here in North America, the biggest lesson that I've learned is that optimism is a powerful mindset. It's not something that we're born with, and it comes easier to some than others. But at its core, even in times of difficulty, optimism is the key to a better future. Thank you.
Thank you, test. Testing, testing. Testing, testing.
Speaker E.
Discovering the optimism within me. Now, at first, this may seem like just another iteration of the age-old saying, look on the bright side. You may have just failed your physics exam. Those two guys you walked past on the way in were definitely laughing at you. And life is becoming increasingly meaningless as we continue to sit by and do nothing about the impending climate crisis. But at least Ralph's is running a sale for 15% off all produce items. So you'll be able to save some money on groceries, right? And it's this perception of the idea of optimism that is what's led so many people to disregard it as nothing more than an out-of-touch perspective only held by people either too immature or too ignorant to recognize what's wrong with their lives. However, when it comes down to it, optimism is so much more than that. See, what optimism really is about is accepting both the bad and the good, and finding a way to stay hopeful for the good to come in the future. So now that we've established what optimism actually means, let's take a look at what things it's important to address with optimism. Starting first with the way we direct optimism inward towards ourselves, which in many cases can be the most difficult. Then we'll look at how we direct optimism towards others, because this dictates the way that we interact with those around us. Before finally taking a look at how we can be optimistic about our society, finding hope in spite of an often bleak future, because this is what's needed to help society going forward. But let's first start by talking a little bit about ourselves. I'm sure all of us here are familiar with the golden rule, to treat others as we would treat ourselves. But being honest, I'm sure most of us can admit that we're a lot more pessimistic with ourselves than we are with others. So let's look at this using an example that I brought up earlier of a failed physics exam. Failing an exam can be a pretty disheartening event, and it can be hard to stop ourselves from falling into a pattern of negative thinking about how we're a disappointment, who will never amount to anything, and I need to stop myself, but I've been there, as I'm sure we all have. But now, instead of ourselves, let's try placing someone else in the same exact situation. Here we see that we're likely going to be a lot more optimistic with them and try to help them understand that one failed physics exam is far from the deciding factor as to someone's path in life. It's pretty wild to see how quickly we can change our perspectives on a situation simply based on who's in it. And it's for this reason, I believe, that instead of treating others as we would treat ourselves, we need to start treating ourselves with the same optimism that we afford others. Because learning to change our pessimistic tendencies is the first step towards leading a more optimistic life. That being said, we also have a habit of being pessimistic about others in the way that we think about them. So let's analyze this using another example that I brought up in my introduction, where on your way in, you walk past two guys who were laughing about something, and you conclude that they had to have been laughing about you simply because that's exactly what you don't want them to be laughing about. This is, again, where we see the need for a more optimistic approach. Because if when we look around, all we see are people who could hypothetically be judging us, we begin to pull back and build walls between us and them. When in reality, we need to be building bridges so that we can reach out and form bonds with the people around us. This is where we see the optimistic approach shining through, as we realize that when we're optimistic in the way that we think about others, that goodness tends to reflect back to us in the end. But now let's talk about being optimistic about our society. I'm sure it's no secret that we have our fair share of problems to deal with right now, and a long-standing pattern of inactivity may seem like an impediment to the power of our optimism. This, however, is actually a pretty big misunderstanding of the way our society works. See, in reality, optimism is the force needed to change that pattern of inactivity. And this rings true when we look at the historical precedent. We must look towards the past to learn the path to the future. And in doing so, we see optimists such as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Thomas Edison, Princess Diana, and so many others who all believed that their actions had the power to make a difference. And our actions are no different. So now I invite you all to reflect on what we've just learned. We learned that optimism means having hope for the future, and that no matter who it's directed towards, be it to ourselves, to others, or to society, it all leads to one place, a better future. But that all starts with you and me, learning to discover for ourselves the optimism that resides within all of us. Thank you. You're live.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. Too excited.
Speaker F.
Optimists and guests. Recently, I've been in the process of discovering the optimism within me. It started with Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. These apps have overtaken Generation Z. That's me. While yes, social media helps us all stay connected, its detriments far outweigh its benefits. Teenagers heavily using social media are found at an increased risk of depression, anxiety, and suicide. And that is the predicament that I found myself in. When I got my first smartphone, I downloaded social media just to see what my friends were up to. Not long after, I was up to here, swallowed up in the bottomless pit of content created with the sole purpose of catching and holding my attention. Soon, my social media feed was filled with guys and girls my age who were not just like me. They were perfect. beautiful skin, beautiful bodies. Every time that I open my phone, I try to see me in them. This intense desire to measure up drove me to the mirror for hours, just staring. Was that pimple always there? Did my cheeks get chubbier? Why are my teeth so yellow? Why can't my jawline look like his? Why can't my hair look like his? I invested hours and hours trying to rid my face of acne using exfoliators, acids, peroxides. Nothing worked. I was disgusted by the way I look. I hated my genetics. I hated myself. I just wanted to be normal. Because the mirror didn't show me what I wanted to see, I abandoned it. I abandoned face-to-face interaction so others wouldn't see my flaws. I gladly wore my pandemic mask to hide as much as my face as possible. The more I withdrew, the less I loved myself. Are you familiar with the song For Your Eyes Only by J. Cole? No? Wrong crowd. Well, one evening when I was in this state of self-loathing, I was listening to that song, and not from the lyrics themselves, but from a flash of revelation, I realized that I had my eyes on the wrong thing. In order to see the beauty within me, I should not be looking at Instagram, TikTok, or Twitter. I should not be looking in the mirror. I should not be focused on my outward appearance. I must look within. I have a mom and a dad who love me and work hard to make sure I can become the man that God intended me to be. I have an older sister and a younger sister, both of whom love me, I think. I am alive and in good health. So, with a little time and a little deeper looking within, I saw that I am a person with VIP status. I have value to offer to my family, friends, peers, and others with whom I interact. I can make an impact by contributing my talents and abilities. I am in this world for a purpose, and will keep that in mind at all times. Value, impact, purpose. These are the basis of hope and the foundation of optimism. I discovered the optimism within me to love myself and who I am. Take a look around you. What do you see? Who do you see? Well, here's the thing that I discovered. We need to stop looking around, stop looking in the mirror, stop looking at social media. Optimism is not seen from the outside. It is inside, looking out. Inside you, you see value, you see impact, you see purpose. Do what I did. Look within and discover your optimism. Promise yourself.
Ladies and gentlemen, how do we welcome these wonderful, wonderful speakers? Come on, up on stage. Yep, that's fine. Okay, now what we'd like you to do is introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about yourself, what school you're going to, if you know the Optimist Club, that's great, or whatever future plans you have, anybody that supported you throughout this journey.
Hi, my name is Natalie Luetta. I am currently a rising senior, so I'll be one this year. I want to thank my mom for organizing me here and listening to my speech like 1,000 times. And I want to thank the Old Pueblo chapter for sponsoring me and Mr. Samoy, my teacher, who showed me this opportunity. And without him, I wouldn't even be here. So thank you.
Hi, my name is Mira Kalaraya. I'm going to be a freshman at Archbishop Mitty High School. I'm from Santa Clara, California, and I want to thank my mom and my dad for supporting me and my dad for bringing me here, and also my speech coach who introduced me to this competition.
Hi, my name is Ty Whitman. I'm from Las Vegas, Nevada. And the first people I'd like to thank is definitely going to be my dad for taking me, my mom for 100% watching from behind the camera, and my speech and debate coach for giving me this as an extra credit assignment like 5 months ago, and I made it here. So I'd like to thank all those people, and most importantly myself for bringing it this far. Thank you. Sorry. I'm a recently graduated senior from Green Valley High School. Oh, and I'm going to Mars Hill University in North Carolina for biomedical.
Hello. Hello. My name is Jason C. I'm 15. I'm from Surrey, British Columbia, Canada. So a little bit far from here. And yeah, I want to thank my mom. I want to thank my brother. You know, I expect you to be on here in like 2 years' time. Yeah. And I want to thank the team. I know it's been a long day, so appreciate you guys for being here. And yeah, so thank you. And to my speech coach, he's like in Ontario somewhere. I'm not sure, like, you know, but yeah. All right, thank you.
Hi, my name is Mateo Pineda. I'm 16, going into my junior year. I'm actually missing like my second day of school right now for this. So hopefully my teachers are okay with that. I'd like to thank all of the people that allowed me to get here. First, my dad for actually going on this trip with me. Then also the Bonita and Coronado Optimist Clubs for helping me get this far. And then all of the positive people in my life, like my mom, my grandma, my best friend Daniel, and my girlfriend Sky, for all always being there for me.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anthony Rivera. I'm from Los Angeles County and California. Where else is there? Los Angeles, though. I'm 16. I'm going into my junior year. Not starting as soon as you, though. I'd like to shout out to my mom, my sister for being here for me, my dad at home working hard, couldn't make it. And shout out to Dana Lamont, my speech coach, who taught me everything I know. Also shout out to my sister Rocio, who's watching from home. And I'd like to thank everyone for this opportunity. I'm very glad that we're able to do this.
So step down with everybody wants to take your pictures now.
Okay, for everyone here and everyone online, that completes what we have here today. in St. Louis. The Francophone region will be online, I believe, later this evening. And most importantly, tomorrow morning at 9:00 a.m., we want everyone to be here because we will have certificates. We will have a group picture of the whole group. We will announce the regional winners and we will have the drawing for the finals. So make sure you're here, and everybody at home, make sure you're watching online. So that's all. We're all optimists, and we are optimistic about our future after hearing these great speeches today.